This is a copyrighted program of Amway Corporation, Ada, Michigan, USA. Unauthorized duplication is prohibited.
Questions asked by Amway distributors at seminars and meetings usually concern things that thousands of distributors want to hear about. Questions range from how were things in the early days to questions about the sales and marketing plan or product. You'll hear Jay Van Andel's answers to questions often asked by Amway distributors and his advice on how to use pressure points in building your Amway business. The first question is, everybody wants to know how Jay Van Andel and Rich DeVos got started. One distributor asked for a brief resume of how Amway was formed.
Rich and I have always been entrepreneurs. We started our first business when we got out of the Air Force after World War II, going to college together. I'd been to college before the war. He had not. I'm the older man, you see. I'm the patriarch of the two. I'm a year and a half older, I think. Anyway, we decided that business was a field we liked. And I think those of you who went through World War II know that you had 3-4 years in military service in which to make some decisions. At least I did. I had 4 years, and your thinking changes around. Before the World War II, I went to college. I was going to become an aeronautical engineer. After the war, I decided I didn't want that. I wanted to go into business. So these are things that happen to you. So we felt that the best thing to do, we were going to a local college. We started attending all of the business courses in class, but we were very aware of one thing, that the fellow that was up front there telling us all about business had never operated one, and the professor. So we thought, well, it was very fine to listen to the professor, but we ought to go out and try some of it ourselves. So we decided to start a small business while we were going to college, and we arranged our schedule. We had a third partner with us at that time. We arranged our schedules so that we could jockey around. Whoever was, in school, the other one was off, could run the business, and we kept sort of a musical chair going for several years. And we started in the aviation business because we'd both been in the Air Force, and that was the point in life where everyone thought that we're going to have not only 2 chickens in every pot, but 2 airplanes in every garage. And, of course, didn't turn out that way, but we did get a government contract, which we managed to wangle, which allowed us to get in on the GI training program. And we figured out a little way at that time where we could become more successful than our competition. We had lots of competition, but all of our competitors made the mistake of becoming flight instructors and going up in the sky and taking care of one customer at a time. We hired our flight instructors, and we got the customers in all the time, you see. And so eventually we outstripped all of our competitors in the area. After about 3 years, we sold out, decided that we were too successful at that age. So we did decide then to spend a year goofing off. We bought a yacht and sailed to South America. We never had a yacht before. We never sailed before. So we learned to sail on the yacht, and that's probably why it sank in the Caribbean Sea. We were rescued. If we hadn't been rescued, I wouldn't be here to tell you about it. And when we came back, we still said, let's go back in business together. This is a great thing. Being an entrepreneur, building your own business is great. So, but, it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to just do it. It doesn't happen that easily. Many of you have that experience, too. You start a business, and it doesn't just go. So we started right after we got back in the importing business, and we'd made some connections in the island of Haiti and decided to import mahogany for a while and sell it to stores. And it wasn't very successful. It was, got off the ground, but it took an awful lot of work. And there were a few other people in the importing business we found. You always find this out after you go in business, You never find it out before. You think you're all alone until you start. And we were young, of course, and somewhat naive. And so from there we were led into some other things, and finally we became affiliated with the direct selling business in 1949 and found that here was something that we could do successfully and that we were able to grow with, that didn't take a fantastic amount of capital that we didn't have to get started, and so forth and so forth. Well, anyway, we spent 10 years in the direct selling business, selling products of other companies. We built a very large direct selling organization in that 10 years, and then we saw it all begin to collapse because the companies from whom we were getting the products began, there were two of them, began an intramural or intranascene fight at the top. Ownership and management got all tangled up, and this caused the boat not only to rock but begin to sink. And we saw 10 years of our effort begin to go down the drain, too. I, at that time, had been elected the chairman of a dealers' association, which was put together in an attempt to try to save things. And so I became the arbitrator, and I sat between the disputants and took the flak from both sides, but finally did manage to solve the fight with a fair degree of satisfaction. And at that point, we decided that we should not go through this again. So at that point, Rich and I decided that we had best now form our own manufacturing and supply organization. So that was the genesis of Amway in 1959, where we started very small and started the distribution of a single product, which we didn't make ourselves. But we knew that very soon we would have to begin making products ourselves in order to prevent another debacle someday in the future. We almost got trapped in the early days on that again, because another one of our suppliers fell out on us. So it wasn't very long before we acquired a half interest in a very small manufacturing company, and that was the first part of our manufacturing division, in order to, again, make certain that we had a reliable source of supply. Well, you see, by that time we had had some 15 years experience in business, some 10 years in the direct selling business. We had a lot of ideas of what was good about it and what was bad about it. And so we were able to then introduce many of our ideas without having to twist or turn someone else's ideas from what they were doing. And Amway, as a result, is the result of our business experience in which we said, here are the mistakes we've made, here are the mistakes other people have made, here are the problems that we see we can avert if we do it this way instead of that way. And we put together at that time the master plan for Amway, which hasn't changed very much. We've had a few modifications, but very little. And, of course, since that time, have continued to personally direct the operations of Amway Corporation and nurse it from its very small start, where there were just two of us, Rich and myself, as the original employees, and we had one part-time employee, Kay Evans, who was a part-time secretary. So it is our brainchild. We've had some business experiences that were not satisfactory in the past, too. We had one that was very educational, and that's all. A toy company we formed one time. We learned how not to do it. So as you go through life and you put all these things together, if you have a reasonable amount of intelligence and a pretty good memory so you remember where you stumbled and fell and don't fall again, you can begin to put things together. Well, as a result, I think today our top management team probably have more experience in the operation of this type of business. And I say that not, just to pat ourselves in the back, but rather just as a fact. We have been doing this a long time. We have learned a great deal about it. We know how it functions and how it shouldn't function. We know how it can be twisted. We know how people can warp this type of business into a fraudulent operation. And so we can pass that know-how on to you and hopefully steer this very large ship, which once was a little rowboat, in such a way that it won't get on the shoals at any time in the future. We think that we have been very fortunate to bring with us, as time has gone along, two great forces. First of all, the great distributor force of people like yourselves. And secondly, we've been able to build internally a great management force of people. They are young and aggressive and sharp, intelligent, and they're the group of people that not only are going to be operating this company and this organization from the home office standpoint in the future, but they're the group that we could not be without today, because it is, of course, physically impossible for Rich or myself to answer every letter, to talk to every person, to ship every box, and to sweep the floor besides. So with these two groups of people, I think that we are so far ahead.
Will Amway continue to expand its product line?
We are constantly looking for future expansion of the product line, surveying practically any idea. We have brought into our office gratuitously each week numerous suggestions and ideas, inventors with favorite inventions to sell, people with ideas, good, bad, or indifferent, mostly not so good, internally developed ideas. We have a group of people on our payroll internally whose job it is to dream about possibilities, whether they're practical or not. We don't ask them to figure out. We only say dream about what might be. So we do have coming to our attention very regularly on practically a daily basis lots of possible opportunities of where we could go. Now, we have to also, of course, set up some way to filter through all of this to find that which may be practical and that which finally can be used. And this means culling out probably 99% of what comes along, and that's a project that takes some time. It takes some brain power. You can't just hand this to anybody to do because they might throw the wrong one out, you know. The one great one that comes along with the chaff is the one you want to save. We certainly feel that we are in two of the best fields for us to be in, the one of home care products, the one of personal care and its allied field of cosmetics. We've made some experiments in the past in various lines that we decided were not for us. We had some trials in our early days of trying to sell big ticket items, as they are called, items that cost quite a little money, such as water softeners for the home was one example. These things we discarded later on because we found that when we get involved with items that need installation and service, we're not equipped to handle that type of activity. Just about everything under the sun has been considered. And sometimes we discard it today, and then we look at it 5 years from now and say, well, we didn't think it was good then, but we think it's good now. So I think you can be assured that we're not just sitting with our eyes closed. There's a lot going on. And whenever we feel that it's possible or feasible for us to introduce something into the product line that will be useful for you and enlarge your volume, we're going to do it. If we feel that it's only going to result in fragmentation of your volume, more items but not any more dollars going through your sales, then we would hopefully not do it. Now, we don't always guess correctly. Sometimes we put out a new product that we think is going to be great, and it isn't so great. And then sometimes we put out a new product that we think is going to be great, and it's twice as great, and we run short. That happens too. And much of this, of course, involves a certain amount of crystal ball prognostication that is not always accurate. And we also know that there's a dynamic in any product line that means it has to be renewed and changed constantly. You can't ever sit back and just say, well, now we've got it, let's just leave it as it is. Things change. Some of these dynamics are forced on us. The phosphate issue, for instance, forced us to do a great deal of changing of our products that we hadn't planned on. Others are brought to us because of technological improvements that become available to us, and we want to take advantage of them so that we can keep our products the best in the market. And others we feel that are just necessary because after a period of time, certain products have to be changed because they become rather mundane and need some new life. So there is just a vast amount of activity going on. If you could look through the book of what we call concept proposals. Concept proposals are the thought proposals that we've put together that we think are feasible, and now we're going to see if we can do it. You'd find a huge volume. It numbers in, I don't know, well over 100 or more concept proposals for future development. So I think you can be assured that we have the machinery to stay on top in a product line. And we are, I think, able to not only stay on top, but way ahead of competition.
A distributor wanting to know what attributes of success to look for in a person asked Mr. Van Andel to draw a profile of a successful distributor.
A psychologist came to me one time and he said, I want to work out for you a cross-section of successful direct distributors. He said, I can work this out for you so you can get a profile of success. So then you won't have to worry about working with the unsuccessful people anymore. You can apply this profile to them. You can pick out the successful ones and let the other ones go. Well, of course, it sounded like a great idea, and of course you know it didn't work. The simple truth is that the profile of success of a successful Amway direct distributor is apparently so complex and so varied that it's not possible to put one together. Now, I suppose it might be possible by the use of a computer, which we didn't have in those days, to do something today that couldn't be done then. But it's much different than the profile of success for, let's say, a successful piano player or successful painter of pictures. These things take certain abilities that stand out fairly well. And still, the most interesting part of the Amway opportunity is that we have so many different people, and you've heard of the backgrounds and heard of all the variations, all the different places where you come from, and all the different levels of education that you've had, and all your very different experiences, and still each of you are able to develop in this Amway opportunity the success that you have. So we've long toyed with it. I know I've had people want to do this with sponsoring too. They said, why don't we just sponsor this kind of person? I've had this happen with successful direct distributors. It seems the more successful they are sometimes, the more they want to simplify this business of not having to sponsor unsuccessful people. And they come up with some great ideas of they're only going to sponsor a certain kind of individual. And I have observed that every time they come up with that great idea, they fall flat in their face. The only individuals I find it possible to be successful with in sponsoring are those who say, I will. And beyond that, I guess there aren't too many requirements.
Another distributor wanted to know to what extent should an Amway distributor get involved in community activities.
Everyone, of course, should be involved in activities outside of their own selfish activities. We all devote some time to our church. We devote some time to civic, to education and so forth, extra time. And each of us has that obligation. I don't think, however, that as a businessman operating your own business, you can afford endless amounts of time in all sorts of extraneous activities, because if you do, you may find yourself running off the road. Your business may not grow. Your business has to finally take priority. That's where you have to spend most of your time. And the rest of it has to be budgeted, and you have to say, well, I've got so many hours a week, and I want to spend some of it with my family, and I want to spend some of it with my other activities, and that's as far as I can go. So I would only offer this caution that although it's fine to support things, I don't think one should become a joiner and join everything that comes along and get deeply involved, because you find yourself after a while having a business that doesn't exist.
Many want to know about Amway's future.
We have a sound business. We have a business that is operated as this sales plan can be operated, in an ethical and honest way. We believe that a business has no right to exist unless it is operated honestly, unless all through it, in the relations between your customers and yourselves, in your relations between you and your distributors, in your relations between you and us, various members of the company, there is that honesty and that trust between each other, that we're trying to do the best we can, not trying to beat each other. And we think that when a business enterprise is operated on these principles, we don't have to worry too much about the future. But that when a business enterprise is operated on the basis of a game to see who can beat who, and who can weasel the most out of somebody else, then obviously it has limited life, and it should have. Now, we have done everything we can to keep these principles in our business operation from the time it's been organized. And I'm very proud to say that we have found that we have attracted into Amway the type of people as distributors who believe these things too. The con man or woman, the dishonest person, the fast buck artist, the suede shoe operator, or whatever you want to call them, they don't feel comfortable among us, and they don't last with us very long. They leave soon because they find there is no shortcut in Amway, and there is no simple way around getting to success. You have to work for it. You have to earn it. You can't buy it. You can't get it by knowing somebody or any of the other ways that people have tried. How big Amway can grow, I guess nobody can answer that right now. At one time, $100 million seemed a long way off as an annual volume. Now, no one can predict the future for certain because there are things beyond our control. International situations, hot wars, major upheavals, revolutions or whatever, can obviously affect any enterprise, commercial or otherwise. Now, all of this depends on these essential elements of operating the sales plan according to the carefully designed methods that we've hopefully imparted to you. And I know that we have to play this record over and over sometimes because the sales plan can be warped and twisted and shortcutted. And we get a little rough with people sometimes when they do. But we're convinced that all the people who have tried to copy us and tried to shortcut have only demonstrated the fallacy because they've gone out of business. And so I think that we can say that the experience that we and the Amway distributors have and the approach we have is the soundest of ways and soundest of reasons on which to build a very successful business. And this has been something that Rich and I have felt from the very beginning, that we do not want to get you and thousands of others like you involved in a business that is only a short-range proposition. For us to just get you here for or in Amway for a year or two and let it collapse is not only a tragedy for you, but for ourselves as well, a disaster for ourselves. We feel that if you have said you want to be with this organization, you want the success that it can bring you, then the least we can do is try to build for you a basis and a foundation that'll go on as long as you want, for the rest of your life and beyond that to whomever you might wish to pass on your business. And I think we're accomplishing this. I think we've got this in our business. And this, to me, is the greatest thing that we can have.
And one of the most asked questions is, what would happen to the distributor organization if you and Rich would ever decide to sell the corporation?
Well, you can phrase that question all sorts of ways. What happens if you sell? What happens if you die? What happens if you get tired? What happens if you get sick? And so forth and so forth. And, of course, the truth is that none of us are immortal, neither you nor me, and that we have the same question with you. What happens when you quit? And we know that you will replace yourselves, many of you with your children and others who will go on. And we know that we have built in Amway Corporation management a group of people, none of whom are immortal, but a group which will go on and understands the philosophy and so forth. Now, whether we were to merge this company with another company or not, I can't conceive that it would make any difference in the management policies, because anyone who were to purchase the Amway Corporation, and please understand, I'm not saying we're going to do this, but if we did, would be an absolute fool if they spent all that money and then turned around and did something which made it all fly apart. So really, you know, the thing that makes Amway work is the systems and the procedures and the philosophy and the know-how that we have all put together in this complex pattern. And to change it would be just the height of foolishness. Now, that doesn't mean that we're cast in concrete. I've long ago learned that you never say never, but we have to be able to make some adjustment for the times and so forth. But it does mean that our adjustments, when we do make them, are made carefully. They're thought through carefully, and you've seen us do it. You've seen us make some changes, and then sometimes we even pull back. We try it, and it doesn't work, and pull back. So I don't think it's a real concern, even though the question is oftentimes asked. I think the Amway organization has gone through the very difficult period many businesses go. What is left becomes pretty permanent after that. So if you can make it for 5 years, you can probably make it for 50. And I think we've gone through our trial period. We have today a great organization with a great amount of thrust and a great amount of forward movement. And it would take a long period of extremely poor management to really be harmful to it. And I don't anticipate we're ever going to allow that to happen.
At seminars and other Amway-sponsored meetings, direct distributors often ask how to best build and operate an Amway business. This question is best answered by Mr. Van Andel in his presentation on the pressure points that you can use to build your Amway business.
Some of your methods of operation as your business grows are going to have to change a little bit. To say, well, that's the way we always did it, isn't necessarily going to mean that that's the way you'll always be successful. And so I would like to just leave with you a few suggestions on how you can keep working in the right direction. These are kind of elemental, and perhaps on first look they'll seem very ridiculously simple. But I would only caution you that as your business grows, you'll find more and more demands on your time, and that the time that you have available to put in your business is finally the only thing that you're going to convert into success. And if you find yourself frittering away much or most of your time in pursuing activities in your business that are not productive, your business won't grow. And it's very easy to do from this point forward. You'll find that it's very easy to become, as a direct distributor, a stock boy. It's very easy to become a bookkeeper. It's very easy to become a truck driver or a typist or any number of other activities that are involved in the management of your business but that are not productive. And so I'd like to just redirect you to some of the productive areas in your business, because you are the manager, the president, the chairman, the general manager of your business. And so unless you direct your efforts in the right way, nobody else is going to do it for you. Oh yes, we may try to tell you, and I think it would be helpful if you would do this and that, but finally it has to come from you. And so I suggest that you view the operation of a business of your own in the same way you would view the conducting of a sport. If you're in a sport, let's say golf or tennis or whatever, you like to win. You don't like to lose all the time every time you play. You try to improve. You try to win against your opponent. And you do this by watching little things. And I think we could call these little things pressure points. There are certain little things which if you play tennis or golf or whatever, that if you do those right, everything else will be okay. You know, I'm not much of a golfer, but I do understand the mechanics. I can't make them work out, but I understand how they're supposed to go, and I understand you're supposed to hit that ball with that club absolutely flat. And if you do, the thing will go straight, and if you don't, it's going to go off in some other direction, which is what always happens to me. But at any rate, if you know that and you keep working toward that, then maybe someday you hit it right. Now, what are the pressure points in this business? One pressure point that I'm going to, again, say over and over, it'll get away from you, is a simple one, that of personal recruiting. It's the easiest one to neglect as you become a direct distributor. Now, a moment of thought will tell you that all of your future direct distributors that you may want to sponsor someday are going to come from the people that you are going to sponsor personally in the future. The ones you sponsored personally so far, you can see them develop. You know about how far that's going to go. But if you want further growth, you've got to bring some more raw material in, you see. How do you do it? Well, we faced that same problem ourselves many years ago. And Rich and I found that unless we were ironclad in saying, let's take a day or 2 days or 3 days a week and do nothing but personal recruiting on those days, it never happened. And so we did just that. We said, we're going to take Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and I said, I'll go out and do the recruiting. You go out and follow me with the training. Every Monday morning I got out of the house and I went someplace and recruited, and I did this until Wednesday night. Now, if you do this every week, you start getting quite a record behind you after a while. It piles up. Now, I don't say you have to take 3 days. We did. But I say unless you take some time and you put a fence around it and you do it, it'll get away from you. Take 1 day, take 1 afternoon, take 2 days, 2 nights, or whatever you decide, but decide on something and deliberately go about doing it at that time, and it'll get done. Put your appointments into that time. Get everything that you're going to do with regard to personal recruiting and do it then, you see. It's a pressure point of the business. Now, you should have a goal for that. You should decide deliberately that you want to recruit 1 more distributor a month personally, 1 a week, 2 a month, 4 a week. That's, again, up to you. But unless you have a goal, nothing will happen. It just won't. And a year will go by, and you'll be on a treadmill. So it's, I think, a very important pressure point in this business to keep growing, because I believe many of you, in the back of your mind, are saying, someday I'd like to sponsor 6 or 8 or 10 direct distributorships. That looks pretty nice. Not next week, not tomorrow, but given enough time, boy, that looks great. I could relax a little bit then. I'd have lots of security. I could be a diamond distributor. I could all these things, you see. And that's great. But to get there means doing these things now, not going along through 5 or 6 years of nothing and then all of a sudden saying, now I wish I were one, and I aren't. It doesn't happen. A second pressure point I suggest to you is what I call outer fringe recruiting. And that simply takes cognizance of the fact that the best place to have your personal group grow is with the person who was just recruited today in your personal group. Because that person is a new branch. He or she has new friends, new relatives, new acquaintances, new enthusiasm. And this person, you handle it properly, has a great opportunity of bringing several more. And that keeps your group growing and builds, you see. If, on the other hand, you don't do anything about that, that person may not be smart enough at this point in the business to understand all that, and may say, well, I won't get around to recruiting now till after I've read all the literature and I've sold successfully for 6 months or a year, and then maybe I'll think about it, and then it won't happen. So we found out that every time a new application came over our desk, we'd make arrangements for somebody to get that person or those persons into a little meeting in their kitchen or their living room with their friends and relatives, and somebody who understood the business be with them and explain the opportunity. Rich and I made it a point always to arrange that. We were the arrangers for that little thing. And if we didn't arrange it, it so often didn't happen. But if we arranged it, it happened. And these are, again, you just put the pressure and punch the button where something's going to happen, you see. Pressure points. Watch your new recruiting and do something about using that to build you more by arranging in some fashion that every new distributor will be setting up in his home a little meeting at which someone will be present. Now, you don't have to do that all yourself. You've got good sponsors in the group that you can rely on. You can arrange for them to be there. Some of it you do yourself, but it has to be done. I would suggest a third pressure point in your business is to set up and maintain a distributor follow-up system for customers. The other day I got a little thing in the mail, many of you have had this I'm sure, from one of the department stores in town that said, it's been a long, long time since we've seen you. What can we do to serve you? You don't owe us anything. We wish you did. We'd like to see you. The interesting point is that this store and stores of this type are smart enough to know that I wasn't there. And that's the essence, I believe, of good sales management. That management, you have to know when you haven't been dealing with your customer for a while. And I find one of the weakest points in our business is a great many direct distributors haven't the foggiest notion about how many of the customers in their direct distributorship weren't served this past month. We therefore have given to you the elements of a management system whereby you can get information from your distributors that says that they either made their call or calls last month or didn't. And if they didn't, that information has to trigger an action on your part. Now, we caution you that this doesn't have to become a major thing that takes days and weeks to maintain. You'll have to designate someone in your office, someone in your home, whoever can do this detail work for you, to get these sales slips and to turn out for you a report that comes in your desk, and a monthly report that says John Jones has not called on 4 of his customers this month. Now, with that report, you know that you lost that many portions of your business, and that if you don't do something about getting John Jones or somebody to call on those customers, they'll never buy from you again, because customers don't usually come running down the street to find you if nobody bothered to call on them. They'll buy from the supermarket or from Avon or whoever happens to be there instead of from you. So if you don't want to lose customers, you've got to have a management system that tells you when your customers are not being serviced, and then you've got to do something about it. That can be done, and it's part, I think, of successful sales management, and it becomes more and more important in the future, unless you, again, want to be in a treadmill where you say, well, I don't care if we lost them all last month, we'll get 2,000 more next month. Well, you could do that, but that's a lot of work. I would suggest also, as a pressure point, that you develop and use with your distributors a customer development program so that right from the beginning they get started on selling. Now, we've suggested a very simple way in the sales kit. Rich and I used to do it this way. We used to say to a distributor, all right, you're starting today, make out a list of 25 people that you're going to call on this week to sell our products to, and show me the list. That was the key. You know, it's easy to say make a list, but it's not so easy to show. Schools have used that for years, haven't they? They give you written tests. Well, by showing us the list, we knew it was done. Then we'd say, next week, show me the list again and show me what happened with each of these. A little bit of ask them to do something and check back. Now, this kind of management seems elemental, but you'd be surprised how much of it isn't done. You'd be surprised how many direct distributors and sponsors merely say, here it is, go ahead and do it. It's all in the kit. Well, it is, but people need a little help. So, again, a pressure point. If you can do those little things in your office, you'll get more value. If you don't do those little things, a great many of your distributors that you recruit will never do anything, and you'll just have higher mortality, and you have to recruit more because more will fall by the wayside. And that isn't the name of the game, I don't believe, or the objective of the game. I suggest also, as a pressure point, that you keep in communication with all of the distributors in your personal group. Now, for many years, Amway has provided part of that. I think it goes beyond that, though. I would hope that each of you are planning, if you have not done so already, some sort of little bulletin that goes out to the people in your personal group. Mimeograph, postcard, I don't care what, but something that tells them what's going on, everything's all right, that type of thing. I found many of the most successful direct distributors send out a weekly bulletin. It doesn't have to become a major project. You shouldn't do it yourself. All you should do is write it yourself. Write it in longhand and hand it to somebody, a service in your town, or someone who will type it, mimeograph it, and mail it for you, and that's all there's to it. Don't get hung up on doing that yourself, because then you'll, again, be spending your time non-productively. We also made a practice years ago, and I thought it was always a very successful thing, of calling all of the people that we sponsored at a distance once a month who didn't get to sales meetings and didn't hear from us in any other way. And it's the funniest thing, but we found it to be true that almost invariably, within a couple of days after the phone call, an order would come in. And if we didn't make the phone call, the order didn't come in. It just kind of kept things rolling, you see. So one or two nights, we'd sit down and we'd put all these calls in. Oftentimes, we'd have office girl help us. She'd get everything arranged and do this. Keeps contact, got things going. Some of those people later became very successful and said, you know, there were times I was going to quit, but I get that phone call from you, and I figured if you were willing to spend the money on the phone call, I just couldn't quit. And there's some truth in that, you know. So contact with your distributors is extremely important. I think it's a pressure point in the business. Just the fact that somebody cares makes a difference. Certainly, attractive sales meetings are an important part of this business. You should make it your goal to see to it that every one of your distributors in some fashion are getting to a sales meeting someplace. You don't necessarily have to hold them all yourself, but somebody's got to hold them. And again, you as a manager will have to see to it that this happens. Or otherwise you may have parts of your sales organization that never get the meetings. And I found that when people don't attend meetings, after a while they don't see them anymore, you know. I think the crux of the whole thing is simply this, that you spend your time on the productive parts of the business. Don't get trapped into doing non-productive details. All we're saying is that we also know that you want to be even more successful, and that therefore we hope that these little cautions and these little peaks down the road ahead may help you avoid tripping, may keep you out of a few gopher holes along the way, and may help you reach whatever your goals may be that much sooner and that much faster.